Good evening
Hey.
and good evening, NNJR. My name is Shannon Muller. Thanks for joining us tonight for the April monthly meeting slash webinar. Tonight, I am very happy to have Rudy Samsel on to discuss the hot car market. He's going to take us through all the ins and outs, the questions you may have that you haven't had a chance to ask. And if you are thinking of selling your car, i.e. a Porsche, now is the time, Rudy tells us. So I'm looking forward to hearing all about this. I just want to quickly, before we start, remind people that the club will have our 65th anniversary picnic on Sunday, June 26th. And the location is at the, oh geez, I'm gonna get it wrong, the Fountain Spring Lake in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Definitely sign up if you're interested. You can reach out to Cindy. And with that, if we don't have any questions from any members, I'm going to toss it to Rudy and we're going to get going. Good
Okay.
evening, Rudy.
Thank you, Shannon. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you taking time out from my busy day to do this. So I'll be in the lower corner so you can see the presentation for the rest of the night. So if you're not familiar with it, I run a website called guyswithrides.com. And in addition to collector car auctions, I do blog of various Craigslist ads I come across. One of the things I like to do every week is what we call the Guess What Ride game. And just for this week, what I've done is this first game is around a Porsche. So over the years of the Porsche 911, Porsche has put a variety of filler flaps on the cars. I picked, and it's not about the shape. I will give you this one clue. These are off various vintages of 911s, and one of these is not like the others. So that old, I think that's what is a Sesame Street game. Which one of these is not like the others? If you scan that blue code, it'll take you to the website. You can put just your name, your phone number. You don't have to subscribe. You can uncheck the email address if you don't want to get the newsletter, and just select the letter you think is the right one. I'll send out a note to everybody that enters, and we'll get a $25 gift certificate to Car Care Specialties. To everyone that guesses right, we'll pick randomly from that group to win the $25 gift certificate. So I appreciate you checking in on that, and go from there. I think it's a bit of a stumper, but I have a feeling there are a few people on here that have already correctly answered and know the tricks I'm up to here. So, all right. So let's see here. I got to get back on my other screen here. Here we go. All right. So navigating the online collector car auction landscape. If you see in the collector car auctions tend to get a bad rap. They're shark infested waters in some respects. And everybody talks about Bring a Trailer. There might not be able to see it in the screen here, but they were the ones that really, after eBay came along, and now we have a number of players, including my site. So I'll take you through some of the landscape that's going on. This is not a sales pitch about my website. It's merely my observations and your strategies, whether you're consider buying a car or selling a Porsche on there. So I've been doing this. So basically, I'm going to give you a background about myself, a market snapshot. I think a key thing for buyers and sellers alike is how to price a car properly and be realistic about it. So I'll take you through my methodology about that. Prior to doing this, I was in pharmaceuticals. So we always talked about in the wholesale business, the buy side and the sell side. I still use that nomenclature in this new venture. So we'll talk about the nuances of each of those and how to, whether you're buyer or seller, what you have to do in that. And then finally, I get a lot of questions about after the sale on an online auction. How does that work? And I'll take you through what we do there. So if anybody has questions, Shannon's the moderator, just chat them in and I'll be glad to answer them as we go. Okay. So, first off, I have no professional automotive experience. I dipped my toes into the world of online collector car auctions 3 years ago, as a way of doing something different after being downsized from a Fortune 10 pharmaceutical company. So my background, though, I am a diehard car enthusiast. If you called my mother right now, she would confirm that car was my very first word. And I didn't have a teddy bear. I slept with a Structo dump truck, metal dump truck, which probably explains a lot, but that's a story for another day. So my undergrad, I have a degreed engineer in industrial engineering out of RIT, and then later on went out back for marketing and entrepreneurship MBA out of U of R during my days in Rochester. The first 10 years of my career was specializing in packaging equipment. And when you're involved with packaging, you tend to work with a lot of marketers in packaging design, and that just progressed and was a natural progression for me to get an interest in marketing. And I can't believe it, but I say at the turn of the century, it's when I made the switch from engineering to the dark side of marketing and sales analytics, and have been there in one way, shape, or form ever since. So seeing the writing on the wall about 4 years ago now, I knew that I started the website as a hobby to learn marketing analytics and Google Analytics to expand my skill set. And it just became a full-time passion from there. And that's how Guys with Rides was started. That combined with the fact it was really started around my trying to buy a Porsche on BAT. True story. If you're familiar with Bring a Trailer, the nice thing about it is you can see all the historical data going back to when they started auctions in 2014. At the end of 2018, I had my eye on a 99 996, this very car, this Carrera 4 Tiptronic. And I'm kicking myself when I pulled up this slide, because I stopped bidding at 13,000, thinking that was 4 years ago. That was big money on this car, and I didn't want to go any further. And now I'm kicking myself because easily it would be 10 grand more. But that's there's a lot of stocks that could have played that as well if I had that kind of hindsight or forward sight. So anyway, the thing that I learned on this is really my first experience bidding on Bring a Trailer. I had been watching it for a number of years. But then I actually had the opportunity, Nancy and I went and looked at the car. And this is a great example of, I'll get into conditions later, but the car, it wasn't a bad car, but they always look better online than they do in person. And this car, as good as it was, it had a crack in the windshield that the seller, I had to point it out to the seller at the very bottom where the two windshield wipers were. There was a leak on the driver's side cam cover I noticed during the test drive. And most of all, the paint needed to be corrected. I was going to probably spend a week's worth of doing paint correction, polishing it, and bringing it up to what I would think a Concours-like standard. So I knew 6 of the days of the car. Then the last day, I was at 13,000. I thought I was going to get the car, and lo and behold, somebody popped in the last hour or so and bid 15,750, which we can all laugh now 4 years later that you could get the car for under 20. And it turned out to be a dealer in Bend, Oregon. This car was in central Pennsylvania, not too far from here. And by December, they had the car listed on their website for just under 22,000. And I noticed when I kept track of it, it had sold in January. So, it was one of those things that it just left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth about the auction world, and the fact that on most sites, whether they're traditional, the 10 auctions you watch on TV or most other ones, you're not bidding against individual sellers. You're bidding against a variety of people. And a lot of them are dealers. They're dealers who are looking for inventory. And you have to be prepared to, I'll get into it later, about not getting caught up in the moment. Because if you're looking to buy a car, your price point as an individual buyer is different than perhaps a dealer who has a more room because of their markup and their ability to resell the car at a higher price. Just that was one of those things that between this and a desire to learn web analytics moved me into it and building the website. So in the 3 years I've been doing it, who knew there was going to be a pandemic that would really want to challenge its try launching a business during the pandemic. But we're in it. One of the interesting dynamics, though, was while traditional sales were basically shut down, Bring a Trailer is based in San Francisco, and San Francisco was one of the first, I think, the first city to lock down in the nation. And they tell the story about how they were able to keep the business going. And it's a fascinating story about how people just gravitated. They actually grew their business during that time. And the spillover effect was quite interesting, that people that may have been hesitant to buy online before started adopting it. And you see this in these two graphs. This graph, the two graphs on this page and the next one are some Hagerty insurance information. But interesting, last year, 2021 was an inflection point in North America, in that the bottom blue line and the gray line are sales of live auctions, in-person auctions versus online. And the sales dollars at just over 1 billion in each channel don't tell the story. This was the first year that the quantity of cars sold online, exceeded those at the traditional live auctions. Now, while this is growing at a tremendous rate, and it's expected to go double again this year, what's interesting is that enthusiast websites like this only represent about 1/8 of the total market. That bottom right graph shows that the private market's still the predominant method of buying and selling collector cars and special interest cars. So a lot of upside here in this market. Another interesting fact of that 1 billion market in North America of online is that nearly 90% of the cars sold over the last few years in that segment were valued at $50,000 or less. So I thought this was an interesting fact, because you hear the big stories of all the big money cars that go on Bring a Trailer and the other sites, record dollars. But really, what's keeping the lights on most of these businesses are the cars that are under $50,000. And driving that trend are not boomers per se, but it's the emergence of Gen Xers and millennials. So in my case, I was born in October '64, so I'm considered one of the last baby boomers. But I like to say I identify as a Gen Xer, because I was too young for the muscle car era. I was in the middle of the malaise, what they call the malaise era, and the cars that were coming out that were getting good again in the mid '80s. Those are the cars I identify with, and that's what you're seeing in this lower right-hand corner. This is quote requests by age group in Hagerty over the last 3 years, and you can see boomers are on the top blue line. Went from about over 40% to about a third of their new business inquiries, whereas Gen Xers and millennials, those two middle lines, are on a growth curve, and so accordingly, when you look at the hobby throughout the years, people gravitate to the cars that they grew up with and wanted, perhaps as teenagers or young adults, and that's what you're seeing now. Is a lot of these '80s and '90s cars are really surging in value, because that's what the Gen Xers and millennials gravitated to. As far as Porsches, I say this quite often, it's a great time to sell a Porsche. And if you look at, when I look at one of the websites I use for data, you'll see these various ones I picked just at random. When you look at the moving average from April of last year to just April of this year, all of the air-cooleds, and I picked the 997, as a water-cooled example, they're up over 10%, in some cases over 20%. The 928 across all 18 years it was produced is up an average of 37%. The 944 Turbo in particular is up 12. And even the Boxster, the base box, the first generation Boxster non-S is up 22%. So, it's just for a few years now, it peaked about, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. The air-cooled market in particular peaked, leveled off, but now you're seeing that rise. And the air-cooleds tend to be the high tide that lifts all boats in the Porsche world. And I think, candidly, a lot of people that are getting priced out of some of the earlier air-cooled cars still want a Porsche, and they look for the next best alternative. And that's why you're seeing the strong demand.
Wow.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions? I know it's a lot of data so far.
Nope. So far,
Okay.
keep going.
All right. So the dedicated, this is a bit of an eye chart, but the dedicated enthusiast online auction fees, you have Bring a Trailer on the left-hand side. There's one called Bring a Trailer. Didn't start doing auctions. They started out in 2007. People don't realize that. They built a community of several 100,000 people before they started actually doing auctions. Next to that is a site called Cars and Bids. And what's interesting about that site, that was started by a guy named Doug DeMuro, who is does car reviews, quirky car reviews, if you will, and he had about 3 million followers when he started the site, I believe 2 years ago. So he had a community on YouTube that he literally brought over to his auction site and was able to grow right from there. If you're into cars at all, you've probably heard the name Hemmings. That's the third column, moving over. And they used to be like a phone book you'd get every month with an orange cover, the Bible of the old car hobby. They don't call themselves that anymore. But here's a classic example of a print magazine trying to reinvent themselves. So they got the idea to try and play Bring a Trailer at their game. And they've had some mild success doing that. So as we move down the line there's a new one called Marquee. And some of you may have seen that one. That is actually, there's a sub company called Porsche Digital, who handles, I believe, all the marketing and the collateral materials for Porsche and some Porsche North America. And they decided to start their own site and get into the game. They're off to an early start. Be interesting to see how that one fares because they're starting with no community. So it's an interesting experiment. The next one over is P-Car Market. I'm sure everyone, if you've looked at a panorama or the website, you've seen this site. Has a very similar look and feel to Bring a Trailer. They probably at least 90 to 95% of the cars they offer on there are Porsches. And they've had some pretty significant cars in the last year or so. They've had a couple of Singers, and they do dabble in some other exotics. So they're on a nice growth curve. And in fact, they just announced they just opened a West Coast office. They're based in Oyster Bay on Long Island, and now they opened up a second office. So that's an interesting one to watch. And another great avenue if you've got a Porsche to sell. Moving on is another upcomer. It's actually a Canadian company, Shiftgate. They're trying to make inroads. You may see them advertised here or there in the various Porsche materials. And then, of course, is my site, Guys with Rides. So those are the various fees you see across them. Generally, Bring a Trailer set the bar at a 5% buyer's premium, and with different various floors and caps. And that bottom area, I show the differences in something you have to plan on if you're buying a car in an online auction is you have to plan on that buyer's premium on top of whatever the hammer price is for the car. All right. So I hear a lot, probably almost about a half a dozen times a week, that I have people call me and they'll say, I tried to put my car on Bring a Trailer, but I got rejected. And they get this Dear John letter as an example on the right. And what people don't realize, it's not like Craigslist, it's not like eBay, where you just decide you can put your car on and it's magically up and people start bidding on it. Bring a Trailer and all of these other sites are curated auctions. So to put it in perspective, Bring a Trailer is, the Mac Daddy of these. They have a capacity which is just floors me, that they're up to 90 cars a day. It wasn't long ago that they were struggling to get 50 a day. And they're doing, not only is it 90 a day, 5 days a week, I think they're doing 30 or 40 on the weekends. So they are, it's just daunting to even go on the website now. But of those, what people don't realize is approximately 40 of those are allocated to dealers. They're very transparent about it, or what I call frequent listers. Those are people that just, they're not necessarily dealers, but they buy and sell cars. They find them and try to flip them on Bring a Trailer. And so when you factor that in, that's 90 cars a day, 40%. That means 36% are going to repeat business, if you will. It doesn't, that combined with the fact they're probably getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 240 to 270 auction requests daily.
Wow.
So that has just grown from the last couple of years. It's just as the website people know about it. So it's like airplanes on a runway. There's only so many planes can land and take off. And if you're not on one of those planes, you're just not getting on the site. So unfortunately, a lot of people get these Dear John letters and they're not given any explanation as to why. If you're looking to get on there to Bring a Trailer, it's great because you're going to expose your car to a lot of people, a lot of potential buyers. But just know that you've got to figure, and we're going to get into it next. The key is knowing how to price your car right and being realistic about it, because the easiest way to get rejected is to ask a reserve price that's not in line with what data they have. Real sidebar, I got a call from a guy the other day, had a 73 Ford Maverick. And he wanted to put it on. He said, I just got rejected by Bring a Trailer. I said, okay. He said, low mileage car, original, it's, the best Maverick ever. And he wanted to put a reserve on it at 20,000. And I just quick did the numbers and nothing has sold even close to $20,000. And I tried to explain to him that that's why he got rejected by Bring a Trailer. So just something to keep in mind. All right. All right. Proper pricing. I always talk about determining your number, right? Everybody has a number, whether they're buying or selling. And I just remember this. There's an interesting experiment in economics that shows something called the endowment effect. If I don't own something yet, I tend to value it less until I own it. And there's this classic example where you have a group of people, and some people get a coffee mug that they have to sell, and others, the other half of the group has to buy the mugs, and the negotiations start. So generally what you find in these experiments is the people that are trying to sell these try to sell them for an average of, they value them at $7, but the people buying them only value them at just under $3. So you have this disconnect of people, this ownership phenomenon of when they have it. And I'll get into it a little bit later in terms of bidding, but it's a fascinating thing of how it sways buyers and sellers differently. What's another interesting thing is the beauty of the internet is the democratization of data. We now have access to a wealth of information that used to have to go to books before, if you could get it at all. So now there's several readily available, no cost places to look to get information. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of Porsches change hands yearly. So it's relatively easy for private buyers and sellers to learn what a car is worth. They just take the time. And the one thing to remember, though, is what you have invested in a car is not always additive to the car's value. This is another problem I run into, where you have a person that has a car that has, maybe it's a condition 3 car. I'll talk about that in a little bit. It's an average car that's worth, say, $15,000. And they bought it for 10,000 and they put another 15 into it. And now they want, they want the 25 out of that. So the reality is, what you have into that is not necessarily what you're going to get out of the market, because and it's just something you have to deal with when you're dealing with these. It's an interesting, with Porsches, with the growth rate, there's a lot of masking of that going on right now. My 928 is a prime example. I bought it for 4,000 2 years ago. If I had done that just 5-6 years ago and put another 6 into it, I'd be underwater very easily. Right now, I'd probably break even or do okay with it. So, a little bit different right now in the Porsche world, but for the most part, you have to keep that in mind when going to sell something. So this democratization of data has really, I found has minimized, well, not minimized, but lessened the need for a traditional appraiser. Now, if you've got let's say an early 80s 911 Guards Red SC, you want to sell, chances are really good you're going to find a lot of data on past sales and comparative data, and you can make a very good assessment whether you're buying or selling it on what the right price is based on the condition, the mileage, and the quality of the maintenance done. You get into situations where you might have an extremely rare or national award-winning example. I think of the Paterax 356 they sold a few years ago to the Porsche family. That's something you need to have an appraiser for, or something has a desirable provenance. Most recently, the risky business 928. The person that sold that at auction bought it, I think, a few years earlier for $50,000. And when it went to auction, it sold last year, I think, for 1.8 million. And if you didn't hear about it a couple years earlier, this car was actually the 68 Bullet, the Mustang that Steve McQueen sold or drove in the movie Bullet, was actually up in North Jersey. And for many years, the guy had it as a daily driver. If you saw this car, it was not worth 3.4 million. But that provenance, it was probably maybe a $20,000 car, because it's a fastback in the condition it was in. But the other 3.3 million on it was all about the fact of who drove it and what they drove it in. So, one of the there are a number of rare Porsches. If you've got a very low quantity one, or you have a paint to sample one, that might make sense to get an appraiser. Comes to mind. More often than not, though, these days, if you plan to borrow money to buy a pre-owned car, you're going to need an appraiser, as most lenders would require that as a prerequisite to get the money.
We will pick I will call you tomorrow. Nothing to say.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So if you look on, we'll get into the pricing things I use, but assigning value is trying to assign conditions to the car. What condition is the car in? When you like the Hagerty valuations, you have easy access to, and another one, collector car. They generally use a 4-range scale. Condition 1 is called Concours. This is a best of show quality, and these cars are often better than when they left the factory. They are perfectly clean and everything matches. The markings from the factory are correct. This is a 100-point car in any judging circle. Very, very difficult to achieve that kind of level. And, if you're looking at some of these pricing guides and think your car is a number 1, it probably isn't. If you move down to condition 2, if you have a very clean, local show winning car, straight, very original. It's either freshly restored to a correct standard or highly detailed, low mileage survivor. Those generally fall in the number 2 excellent category. And you want to look around those. The vast majority, if you were to do a bell curve, the vast majority of what I would call weekend cars, people's third cars or weekend cars, fall into this number 3 good category. They're a car you can get in without excuses. You can drive it. You might not see any faults from 10. They call it a 10-footer or 20-footer. You don't see anything right away, but you dig in a little bit deeper. That's comes up. Very good car, decent car, a lot of fun still. May need a few things here and there, but generally overall good car to buy. That Porsche I showed earlier on Bring a Trailer, solid number 3 car. Condition 4 is where you get into, I call these the daily drivers. These are something you would see if you walked up to it. You would, if you're not even a car savant, or you see dents, you see paint defects. Maybe the chrome is a little rusty. It's what I would call a daily driver, and it's got the battle scars to prove it. And that's nothing wrong with it. Just you need to take it to, if you want to bring it up a level, it might need a paint job. It might need a new interior. But generally, car that's a well-used car would be that condition 4. And these aren't hard and fast buckets. You may have, maybe a fresh paint job is offset by an original but worn interior. So maybe it falls into that 2.5 category, or even the 1.5 category. So, but these generally are the buckets we try to use to try and come up with a guideline. Okay. Any questions, Shannon? Are we good? Okay. All right. So this is maybe a little tough to see, but one of my favorites is that's readily available now. It's called classic.com. And not only is the name good, I can't believe they got it, but this one relies on data from a variety of sources. My site is one of them, the results of it. And they basically, it's one of these sites like a Zillow for classic cars, because you can actually click on the green dot shown and it'll show you the car, when it was sold, what was the location. You can click on through the dot and you can actually read the original listing for it and what it's sold for. The only caveat to this is one of my pet peeves is some of the traditional auction houses and Hemmings Online. When you look at the price, that includes the buyer's premium in it. So if a car hammered for $10,000, you'll see on Mecum or Barrett Jackson or Hemmings, you'll see they'll say the hammer price was the sale price was $11,000. There's a lot of debate on whether, what's the right number. I tend to go with the hammer price because I think all of us would, if we go to the DMV, it's the number you're going to use when you go to register and pay tax on the car. So it's one of my pet peeves of the industry, but that's just something to keep in mind when you go to look at the various prices, that the hammer price was 90% of probably what's shown on some of them. Two others I use is the collector car market. And the only constraint with this one is it only has data up through 83. So if you're looking at something a little bit newer, that one falls out. Haggerty Insurance, they have a pretty robust analytics engine with caveats. And what you'll find with any given car that they have listed, their prices tend to be higher than anything else. And what I find is, and this goes back to any data I've ever used in my professional experience, the minute you say it's self-reported data, you have to take it with a bit of grain of salt. And unfortunately, Haggerty's mix is 70% what they call private party, 20% auction, 10% dealer. So that 70%, what they're doing is let's say you have a policy and I call up Haggerty. I said, hey, I just sold my 65 vet. They'll interview you and say, okay, well, what'd you sell it for? So they're relying on what the seller's telling them and what the buyers are telling them they paid for these cars. And so it's that self-reported might have a little bit of noise in it. On top of the fact, like I talked about earlier with the 20% auctions, you may have that buyer's premium inflating it in it. So it's whenever you can use as many of these data points to come up with what you can for a value. And it's the more data you can use, it's always the better alternative. There's a classic example of if you take your 83, if you've got a 83 Porsche 911 SC and you see number one Concours, oh, I can get 117,000 for it. No. Your car better be very, very low mileage special. You're probably being more realistic to be in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. And chances are, if you've had it a few years, that's quite a windfall from what you paid for it.
Yeah.
One of my attorneys once told me, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So
I have a question for you.
okay.
Do you find that the prices in Excellence magazine reports are accurate for sales?
Well, they are, and those are reported, and they give a wide range of them from what I've seen. I don't use them particularly. The graphs, for example, the listings they have in the columns, there's a wide variance in it, and it's tough to tell over the conditions. I mean, it's another data point. They're good guidelines. I like the one thing I do like about Excellence is they that analysis they do. Somebody will write in and say I paid this much for it, and they'll say whether it's well bought or well sold. I think there's fair amount of honesty there. I don't think people would try to inflate it or deflate what they paid there. So, yeah.
Good to know.
Yep. Okay. All right. So the buy side, what to think about when you're bidding online. All right. So like anything else, you got to do your homework. Let me just, my voice is going here. If you've got your heart set on something, learn everything you can about the car you're interested in, particularly if you're going to try to buy it online. You want to know, if you can, depending on your time constraint, if it's, the car of your dreams just came up on a 7-day auction, maybe printed materials aren't the quickest thing unless your nearest library, but certainly internet articles, there's YouTube's a wealth of information on many cars, particularly Porsches. You can find past reviews. If there's not an old review of it, somebody's probably done a buyer's guide on the car. You can triangulate some of various people's reviews on it to get things to look for. We have a wealth of knowledge and experience in this club. So if somebody's considering buying a car and doesn't know anything, just ask. We got to get more than, I don't profess to know 1% of what most of the people even on this call know. So it's getting you, if you have questions on some of these cars, it's getting you in front of the right person, and leverage that to learn more. There isn't a day that doesn't go by I don't learn about something about a car, whether it's a Porsche or something else. And it's just, you're always learning in the collector car hobby. So leverage that. And an interesting place to look and learn about cars, if you're looking at a particular model, is the past Bring a Trailer auctions. Some people complain about the threads they have and the comments. If you can get past it, there, for every 2 or 3, yeah, I had that car in high school and I loved it. There's usually somebody putting in a valuable comment or a pearl of wisdom about that particular car that you didn't know about. And between that and what they're looking for in the car and between that and all of the past results, they never go away. The Porsche I showed at the beginning was a prime example. You've got that wealth of knowledge to look back on and learn and know what to pay for a car. or to sell it for. So I think playing around in auctions is like gambling. And a wise man once saying, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And it's true in the auction game. You need to look for, there's things I look for, regardless of the car's condition. There's certain themes that come up time and time again in an online setting. One of them is the quality and the quantity of pictures provided. If somebody's trying to sell something with 4 pictures, that's a red flag to me. And you can never post enough pictures. The seller's responsiveness to questions. You see this a lot on Bring a Trailer in particular. If they are not responsive, they're chastised, and the pricing is penalized. That is a lot of bidders and the community take that as a sign that they're hiding something or don't want to divulge what's going on with the car. Another thing you've got to rely on is the amount of documentation available on that car. And whether that's, from the original sticker to the window sticker to the last receipt of what's been done on the car, or is there, if it's newer than 1981, does the Carfax show the maintenance? Does the latest owner have a stack of receipts? I have a Jaguar on my site right now that he's the second owner of. He has the receipts for the 20 years he's owned it, but we don't have it for the first 3 years. But it's safe to assume that it was dealer maintenance based on triangulating the stack of receipts he has with the Carfax on what that shows. And you have a pretty well documented car versus some others that if you just don't have any maintenance records or that's you should price that into what you're willing to pay or sell for the car. But one of the things with bidding, like gambling, you need to set your maximum price and stick to it. Don't
Bet with
all of
your
these-
head, not over it.
Yeah, right. So once you figured out what you're willing to pay, don't get pressured by the end of auction time extensions. My particular site, I do not run them. I follow eBay's rule where you can put in your maximum bid and the system will automatically do it. But all these other auction sites, they've decided to go with this end of auction 2-minute rule, where if somebody bids at the last minute, the time keeps going. I think it makes for great theater for all the non-bidders, but I think it makes people make decisions that they're pressured, and it comes back to this endowment effect. Ownership creates satisfaction, and something a corollary to that is loss aversion. Nancy says it best. I can never give her a paddle if we're at a 10 auction, because once she's bid on something, she's not leaving until we get it. So it's that even though you don't own the car yet, if you were the high bidder, you feel like you own it. And when somebody else comes in and outbids you, now you want to just get back in the ring again. And it's like it's kind of like that gambling thing. Like you can, okay, my luck's going to change here any minute now. But pick that number and stick to it. All right, so this goes to manage. I'm a firm believer in particular the notion that people would bid online, sight unseen, and rely on the pictures given. It needs to be a very well documented car, and particularly with Porsches, I always recommend you get a pre-purchase inspection or a PPI. Now, it's not a guarantee, but it is an unbiased third party's confirmation of the car's condition, cosmetic flaws, and maybe what things need to be repaired after the sale. So the analogy I use is, you see this beautiful car on the site. It's your dream car. It's the risky business, early 80s 928. And it's like the early 80s version of Jamie Lee Curtis, right? So your mind is in a place where you think the car is going to look perfect. Well, then you get a PPI back, and it's the 2021 version of Jamie Lee Curtis. Still beautiful woman, but we all have our flaws as we age, And that's what the PPI shows for you. You know, you can manage your expectations about the 928 as you're getting it. And then if you don't get one and you rely solely on what's shown and don't do any validation on it, you have to worry about, is the buyer, is the seller hiding something? And is it the Jamie Lee Curtis character that's in her latest movie that's just downright scary? So you don't want that showing up at your driveway when you thought you were getting a risky business car. So it's typically as much as $300 for a PPI. You know, you can use a company called Lemon Squad, but candidly, if you're looking at a Porsche, I would recommend a local independent shop or even the Porsche dealership, because they're going to give you the best indication of Porsche specific things, and they have the equipment to hook it up. You know, like looking, has the engine been over revved? Is there any other things going on with the car that a typical Lemon Squad mechanic or other might not know about? So definitely insurance policy. I've actually had to, because I use PPIs on many of my auctions. I've had the situations where the seller told me about the car and it ended up being like this one on the right-hand side of this screen. It cost me several $100s, but I would rather have walked away from a car knowing that it was a bad car, not presented well, than to have God forbid, a buyer find out and then I hear it on the back end. So it's just one of those things. I consider them they're not a guarantee, but they're a pretty good insurance policy. All right, so this one is an interesting example of the winner's curse. A little out of order here. This is a documented case of a buyer who bought a car on Bring a Trailer, and this is not a slam against Bring a Trailer, but it is a case of be careful what you bid. The winner's curse is, did you pay too much for the car? Yeah, you won the car, yay, but did I pay too much for it? And if you don't know the story about this one, this was December of 17. This was an immaculate 5 Series BMW, stunning Concours quality car. The winning bid was $50,000. For whatever reason, he decided to sell it in early 2020 at Amelia. Now, as the story goes, the thought was he tried to put it back on Bring a Trailer, but Bring a Trailer wouldn't set the reserve price back to $50,000. They wanted to do something less because they like to keep their reserve rate, their sell-through rate up. So he ended up, for whatever reason, going to Amelia Island, and he ended up selling it. You see I can't see it with people in the bottom, but the sold price is shown as $38,000. So in 14 months, it went from $50,000 to $38,000. And but wait, like I talked about earlier, this Bonhams auction, they put the buyer's premium in it, so you got to take another 10% off of that. So basically, the seller was left with about $35,000. So a $15,000 loss in about 14 months. So it's just one of those. The winner's curse can bite you if you're not careful.
That's a sad story.
Yeah, a beautiful car though. I mean, it's a beautiful car. All right. So, any questions before I move on to the sell side?
Nope. Let's go selling.
Okay. So, online auctions are not right for everyone, and you see, there's still a small percentage of the business, and I'll be the first to admit, I see John's on the phone here, or John's on the call. You should consider using an expert like John. If you're not knowledgeable about cars, you have a nice car, but you don't have the time to dedicate to marketing and selling it on your own. Maybe you want to keep your privacy or anonymity, or you need to sell it quickly. John's a great resource. There's others in the club as well. And it's a great channel to do it that way if you want to be hands off on selling your ride. If you're more of, you're very knowledgeable and engaged in wanting talking about the car, it's maybe a family member, a family heirloom, and you want to be engaged in that. And You can answer questions in a timely manner on an online format, an online forum. And if you have thick skin, can you take criticism about your baby? As people will critique it on an online site, you have to have some thick skin on it sometimes. And you have to be open to bidders inspecting the car in person. If you're not open to those things, then you know, like I said before, perhaps a dealer or consignor is the right thing for you. So if you decide to go down that path of selling online, I can't stress enough, you cannot take enough pictures. This on the left-hand side here is a checklist that I recommend as a minimum, and typically it's not enough. If you start getting into the 150 range, that's usually a good sign that you've got enough of the undercarriage, every little defect around the car, close-ups of it. You know, that's the more pictures you can provide, the buyer's confidence goes up. And I have a video, there's a link on my website where I show how you can take pictures of depending on the car. I mean, if you have a very special car and you've gone the appraisal route, then you should hire a photographer. There's Don Miliano comes to mind. For a few $100s, you can get some great pictures on there. I don't know if Cobus is another person that does that. Some great photographers in the club that know how to do this. And if you're really looking to maximize your dollars, that's worth a couple $100s to get the car photographed the right way. But in most cases, with the quality of our phones now, if you just know to have the sun behind you at the right time of day in the right place, and do it outside, you can get very good pictures for what you need to sell the car. And I came up with this little acronym a couple of years ago around Christmas time. And when I take my own pictures, I call it Noel. And it's the first one is natural. Some call it the hero shot. Never in your driveway. It's you want people to feel like they're going to experience the car and could jump into the picture and experience it on their own. That ain't going to happen in your driveway because now it's the car's still in your purview. So try to find a neutral area to take the car outdoors. If the car runs, get it outside. Pictures are not going to do you any good if it's inside a garage, particularly a dark one. So get it outdoors. And I run into this all the time where I have a seller who might have multiple cars, and they'll have multiple cars around, and they'll take pictures of the car with those other cars around. And what happens? I'll get a question. Well, this car for sale is nice, but what about that one over in the corner? It goes down a whole different path that, we need to avoid. So just neutral setting. It's all about that car at that moment. And I call this one early, E for early, but it's really the golden hour, but E fit better. And I'm a morning person. So when you're going to try to take pictures, you need to try to do it what Nancy refers to as the golden hour. It's either 1 hour after sunrise or 1 hour before sunset. And lighting is everything with the right pictures. This last one is low. Now, this van's a bad example of that because you get to stand up and you're still at the same level. But like most of our cars, they're very low center of gravity. You've got to get down on your knees and get really down low with the car, because that gives a sense of motion and gives a sense of proportion to the car that you don't get when you're looking down on it. I use these two. I blogged about this van a couple of weeks ago, and it was an interesting, all the pictures this guy posted of his vintage Econoline van. This one on the left is just a great picture because you can tell it's just a faded out, kind of rusty paint job, but he picked the right time of day, and he's got it at the side of the road that's curving off in between those two mountain peaks. You just want to jump in that van and go surfing wherever he went to. And that's a hero shot to me. But the other extreme then is he's got this same exact van, probably between 10 and 2 on a cloudless day. and you can see just how intense the light is, and it just washes out what's already a faded paint job on the car, and just makes the car look truly, there's as faded out as it is. So it's really revealing the time of day you take a picture, and like the saying goes, you want to show your car in the best light possible. It's literally true.
What do you think of videos, like supporting videos with your
Well,
pictures?
I'm glad you asked that. So I always said, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, then a video is worth 1,000,000. And people are looking for that more and more. It doesn't have to be a full-on production. A great way to do it is, what I instruct some customers, if I can't see the car myself, is do a cold start of the car. Have somebody in the car turn on the ignition, show the engine starting, and then immediately go back to the tailpipe. Show the tailpipe. Is there white smoke? Is there blue smoke? Idle down and show that. You need that 30 seconds to a minute. Show that. Do a walk around of the car, and just that minimum video of showing it. It tends to show more of the defects for whatever reason. Video can show a little bit more than maybe some photography, but it does show. It gives buyers a little bit more perspective on the car than some stills. Yeah, so I highly recommend it.
And would you narrate or just kind of talk over?
Well, no, in fact, this one here, you'll see, I do, I let the engine do the talking. And then if you do a drive, like when I'm walking around a car, I'll put some B-roll music in just to set the mood. But generally, when I go for a test drive with, when I do it, I'm sitting in the passenger seat. I'm taking pictures of it, and we try to be as little conversation as possible, so people can hear, potential bidders can hear the car running and any noises. And again, it's about the car, not the conversation. So, yeah, that's try to do that.
Okay,
And I've been successful. Some of the more successful cars on the site have been because of the videos.
good to know.
Yep. Okay. Oh, sorry. All right. So after the sale, I get a lot of questions about this. Now, when you set up an online marketplace like this, you're not a dealer. So you're a matchmaker of buyers and sellers. And so once the hammer price is done and the buyer and seller have agreed to that price, then it becomes a question of them getting together and figuring out how to pay. So I've had instances where cash is king. People show up, and I had one instance, no lie. The guy's a law enforcement in Allentown. He went down to North Carolina with 20 grand in one pocket and his Glock on the other side, and said, "Nobody's going to bother me." And he's one of the few people that can do that, and more power to him. In the absence of having a Glock, being able to conceal and carry a Glock, you might want to go the wire transfer certified check route. And I have probably the vast majority of my customers, that's what they do. And I instruct a seller to work with their bank to set up a temporary account. That's the key, a temporary account. Most banks will do it. And they give that temporary account information to the buyer. The buyer has the money wired into that temporary account. Once the bank realizes the money's been done, they transfer the money into the primary account, close out that account. That protects the seller from any clawback, not only of the money they got for the car, but also potentially, what other assets they have in their primary account. And conversely, the seller needs to send the title, bill of sale, typically one set of keys to via overnight mail, either FedEx or UPS, something that's registered, so that the buyer has confidence they haven't sent money to a black hole, if you will. So it's worked out. It generally works. If people are very risk averse, and nobody has used it yet, there is a company online called escrow.com that for a nominal fee, they will work as the intermediary between buyers and sellers. So the buyer sends the funds to the escrow company and the seller sends the documentation. They put it all together. When everything's been properly submitted, then they release the materials to the other person and everything goes from there. So, certified checks. I had one instance where, one or two instances actually, where the seller has gone to the buyer's bank because they had a common bank, and the seller could watch the buyer initiate the certified check at the bank, and that's the confidence of knowing that, okay, it's a legitimate check, because you have to watch certain situations with cashiers and certified checks now. So unless you didn't see it being written, you might want to consider the wire transfer route. So just something to consider there. Shipping is fast becoming, as much as prices are on the cars themselves, I'm finding that shipping is becoming a huge pain point for people. And I'm noticing a trend where people are not bidding on cars as far away from them unless it's the ultimate dream car they wanted. If it's something fairly that comes up fairly often, they're going to look locally as opposed to nationally. And one of those primary reasons is I'm telling people now to budget $2 a mile for enclosed shipping, and that's probably a padded number for the most part. And but if somebody's not doing this very frequently, doesn't have any connections, that's probably not a bad number. I'm hearing, between the cost of fuel and other things, some companies like McAllister, they're charging 6% surcharges on top of the mileage rate. So you have to be very careful now. And
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do anyone use Zelle for payment? I think we have that, but that's Bank of America, right? No, Zelle.
It hasn't come up, it hasn't come up as a thing yet, but at some point we probably have to open up and look at that as an option.
Yeah. I mean, we use it, but I'm not saying we use it, for cars.
Yeah.
You can't Venmo money like that.
No. So,
Okay.
That's all I had. Hopefully people found it informative. Any questions?
Yeah. How many cars have you bought and sold since you've started this project?
Well, candidly, my sell-through rate's been light. It's been about 20%, which is way off. I think we just had our 100th car.
Wow.
In the last week. Yeah, a lot of cars offered, but not. It comes back to the community and having word of mouth.
Gotcha.
So I've offered a lot of cars, but then just not finding the right buyer at the right time.
Gotcha.
And, it's not unlike how Bring a Trailer started in 14.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and the pandemic changed everything.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
So, yeah. It's a little scary as I look back on all the cars I had up that it's like, wait, oh, we've done a lot, but yeah.
We have one more question.
Sure.
We saw the percentages earlier, but what do you think the overall market is up since the pandemic? Is the market up since the pandemic? Sorry.
The market since the pandemic. So you're saying since 20?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Overall, the prices of cars and the demand for classic cars is up. I think there may be some spillover you're seeing because people can't get new cars. It's been very hard that maybe people are buying classics, and that combined with the fact that knowing that a lot of people have been locked down, they couldn't do anything for many months, so fair amount of people had extra cash suddenly, and they want to spend it on something, and that combined with the with the dynamics of, this pandemic taught me that life's too short. Maybe I need to splurge a little bit. So I think that's been helping for demand on cars. I think, there's been, I think I see the traditional 10 auctions are struggling for inventory and traditional outlets. I think, there's been a bit of a cannibalization because people can put the cars online, and it's making it tough for, traditional channels to find the right inventory. So, but the
I
demand is definitely there. Go
I
ahead.
do have another question, and I hope you have a good sense of humor about this. Britt Finley would like to know, can gals also buy and sell on your site?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys if you go, Nancy came up with the term guys with rides. And if you look, there's a book talks about the guys as a pronoun. Everybody doesn't realize how much they use.
Yeah, no,
Going
that's
back to guys.
great.
Yeah. So there's a link to that, and I will send that to her. She can see people. We're all guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all car people are guys.
Mm.
Well, this was great, Rudy. I'm hoping
Okay.
people reach out to you, separately, one-on-one. We got
Okay.
one last question. Sorry.
All right.
Has the collector car market ever increased by 20% year over, say, the past 50 years? And is this the COVID effect? I think I read that right. Has the collector car market ever increased over 20% year over, say,
I'd
in
have
the
to go.
past 50 years?
I'd have to go back and look, and I see John's on here. It was pretty strong coming up to 2008. I don't know what the year over year numbers were back then. But then I think it was 2008 or 2009 with the Great Recession that really put and there's one more that comes to mind when muscle cars were building up, and I can't remember what year it was. It's going to be interesting to see how much this plays into it, whether this is a temporary thing. I happen to think it's going to be look, if you study markets at all, what goes up always comes down at some point. I think we're getting it. We're getting into territory, and this is Rudy's soapbox. I think we're getting into territory where the prices are just getting a little bit crazy, and not a little bit crazy, but a lot crazy. And you just shake your head on some of the things, and you wonder, A, where are people getting this money, and why are they not being rational about it? And so, am I dodging the question? I'd have to look back and see if there's been growth like that year over year. I know, again, the end of the 2000s, it was getting pretty strong before the Great Recession, but once again, everybody thought it was going to be go, go, go. And this is before I was even in it. I was just a hobbyist, I guess. And the market corrected itself. So at some point here, we're going to see it again. You're a fool if you don't think that's going to happen.
Correct. I agree.
Now, that goes back to, I always say this about collector cars. The best thing that can happen to you is if you're buying a car and not speculating on it. If you buy a car for price, drive it, put some miles on it, and sell it a few years later for what you paid for it, how can you be not happy on what essentially is most of the time a depreciating asset? So anything above that, it's a good thing. Now, some people will debate that all day long, but if you enjoy the hobby and you want to enjoy the car, get the one you like, and hopefully you break even at the end of it.
Yeah. Just like art, buy what you like.
Exactly.
Mr. Mahan said that. Well, this was great. Like I said, I hope if people have questions, they can reach out to you directly. Obviously, John was on the call. He's a huge, great resource on these topics as well. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We will post this. It's been recorded, and hope everyone tunes in for May. We're going to be seeing Ron, Gordon, and Maggie again about the Porsche Parade, as we're now in phase 2 for registration. And if anyone has any questions, please send me a direct email. But thanks for tuning in, and thanks, Rudy, very much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Hope everyone has a good night.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rudy.
I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Okay.